Good evening or good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Hoops HD Championship Week Video Notebook, day number 7.
Yes, it
Uh,
is actually evening still.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
it is day 7 because, Monday was – I can't believe championship week is already a week old.
Yeah, it's already half over. This week is half
Right.
over. We're 7 days into the week is half over.
I know, yeah. I mean, that's crazy.
But I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by David Griggs, the #1 ranked puppetologist just out there,
Yep.
and John Sleeka down below, who is norsing it up. And this is the show where we go over news and notes. We review all of the conference tournament action from the day. We preview the next day's conference tournament action. We update our Hoops HD survival board. But we begin, as we've begun every one of these shows so far, with our championship week or our Hoops HD mailbag.
Woo-hoo. No.
David, you're the one that began this mailbag thing, I think, aren't you?
No, I didn't.
I got a couple of questions here. This one came in via an email from Glenn from Miami. So, Glenn, we got your question up here today. You won the pick here. And I guess, Sleek, let me throw this one over to you. Glenn mentions that Northwestern is pretty much has clinched a NCAA tournament bid for the first time in their history. William & Mary lost tonight, joining Army, St. Francis, Brooklyn, and Citadel as the other 4 teams that had never made the NCAA tournament despite being members since D1 began. But all 4 of those have been eliminated now as a result of William & Mary's loss today. His question to you is a little bit of future predicting with Northwestern. And who do you think's up next? Who do you think is the next of these 4 teams to come off of this list?
I mean, if it were a couple of years ago, I might have said Army, given the momentum that Zach Spiker was starting to build up. But I still think I'd go with William & Mary. But I'm still struck by a comment that Lee Del Vecchio made in the email thread. Even with Northwestern inevitably about to get their first tournament bid, what is there to be said about NKU possibly getting to the tournament in their first year of eligibility?
And let's throw in another one there. Omaha possibly getting in their second year of eligibility. We'll get to them in a
True.
minute also.
Yeah.
But David, do you agree with him? William & Mary next team up?
Yeah, I don't see how it could be anybody else other than William & Mary or St. Francis Brooklyn. Both have been very close. Both have been to the championship game multiple times in recent years. St. Francis Brooklyn actually hosting it was it a year or two? I think it was 2 years ago.
Yep.
But the Citadel and Army just aren't even competitive to. I mean, they finish in the second half of the conference far more often than that, and that is not changing in the foreseeable future. So I would go with either like one of those two, St. Francis Brooklyn or William & Mary. It's a little bit astounding that they've never been, like in all those years, they've not won one conference tournament as good as both of them have been at times.
But then again, the thing about Army is they would have had an NCAA tournament invite. I think it was the late 60s or early 70s, but turned it down because they had a shot at winning the NIT that season.
Yeah, under Bob Knight there. And they had a point guard on that team by the name of Mike Krzyzewski. I think he wanted to do something pretty good, too. Pretty good. He ended up being a pretty good coach, I think.
You don't have that option anymore.
No. David, I had one other question. This was actually specifically addressed to you, so let me read this one to you.
Okay.
This comes from Bob from Portland. Not sure if it's Portland, Oregon or Portland, Maine. He didn't specify, just Portland. But he says, Dear David, what is up with all the Tim Miles love? I would think you would be more of a fan of a coach like that is slightly better than that, like Barry Hinson, Tim Cluse, or Frank Haith. Can you please explain?
Oh, my God. Better than Tim Miles. What is this guy drinking? I don't. Well, I mean, it's not that I love Tim Miles. I really don't. I mean, when have I ever said anything about him that wasn't entirely objective? Ever. Give me one example.
We don't have all night here.
Well, I mean, that's just a horrible question.
I just read them.
I don't understand where he's coming from with that.
But let's go ahead and let's actually turn to a little news and notes here. Today was the final regular season day in both the American and the Big Ten, the last 2 conferences to finish up. American Cincinnati actually went and blew out UConn on the road here. For anybody that thinks that UConn is going to be able to win this conference tournament at home by beating the likes of Cincinnati and SMU, I think they should just look at today's game. Few games in the Big Ten, though, of note here. First of all, Iowa took care of Penn State at home. Wisconsin went and beat Minnesota and actually got their got back on track here after the way they've been playing the last few weeks.
It took them a half to get going because they were actually trailing by 2 against the Gophers.
Yeah. Michigan blew out Nebraska on the road, completely demolished them, David, kind of in that Tim Miles.
Well, yeah. Well, it just goes to show you that there's no way that you could legitimately beat Nebraska like that. Like maybe somebody like the Golden State Warriors, but not Michigan. And it's just, to me, it's indicative that they just are cheating and should be taken off the board.
Bob from Portland, there's your example. Just play back the last 10 seconds.
What?
And anyhow, the other game was Purdue winning at Northwestern this evening. This afternoon. Purdue played. It was a close game, and Northwestern, I think, despite losing, it really looked like an NCAA tournament team.
They did. Northwestern looked good, and I don't say this lightly. Their fans were amazing. It was so electric, and it was so special to see that at Northwestern, not typically known for its rabid fan support. Just it's exciting for me to see people that are that jacked, that have never had something like this before.
One other piece of news here, actually, Kim Anderson in Missouri has resigned effective after their SEC tournament run is over. Means effective after one more game.
Yeah.
He's technically it's a resignation, but he was told to resign, kind of. So,
but not voluntary, in other words.
An involuntary resignation. We'll put it that way, David. Did it have something to do with his failure to schedule another non-conference team, though?
Yeah, I think it had everything to do with not getting Nebraska on the schedule. I mean, yeah, they've what have they won 5-6 games this year, and they've been utterly terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the real reason was that the rivalry ended. Missouri is one of those programs that has a very, very high ceiling. And it seems like anybody that's decent should be able to win there. You don't have to be good, just decent. But if they get the right coach, I think they're going to turn it around pretty quickly. I mean, this is a team that we've seen in the top 10. It's a team we've seen in the Elite 8. It's a team we've seen lose to a 15 seed. Not many teams have done that before.
Let's go ahead. Let's turn to today's conference tournament action. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up on the screen here. Half a second, should be coming up right now. There it is. We'll start in the Missouri Valley championship game today.
Yeah.
John, you've been on the Illinois State bandwagon all year long. They, for the second time this year, got blown out by Wichita State. It was maybe a little bit closer than 20 points, but not much. At this point, is Illinois State still in your opinion?
This game was not as close as the score would indicate, and this was the one thing I told Illinois State, you better not do this if you want to really be considered. I mean, it would have been one thing to go eye test and say, okay, they lost by about 4 or 5 points, but the way Wichita State has been dominating competition, it's no wonder Greg Marshall had a few interesting words for Jerry Palm after the game.
Yeah, but Wichita State is in. I guess that's the other question with this. And Dave, we're actually going to be doing a bracket rundown show in addition to a video notebook tomorrow night. So I think we're going to have to talk about both these teams tomorrow. But really just a question of where you seed Wichita State and whether or not Illinois State makes the field.
This is one where I'm actually not a dissenter or an outlier. I've been having them in the 8-9 range pretty much for the last month. Really since I can remember, since maybe not all the way back to January when we first started doing the bracket shows, but I've had them pretty much close to the top half of the bracket, if not in the top half of the bracket. That's where our committee's been putting them, and I think that's where they're going to land, at least in our field tomorrow. And I think the real committee's going to have them about right there too, right in that 8-9 range. Yeah,
I would think Illinois State is probably going to be on the outside looking in at this point. If they make it, it's going to be because the committee has decided they want to try to emphasize another mid-major or two into the field, but I just haven't seen that the last couple of years, so I just don't think it's going to happen.
But I think to answer Chad's question before I get accused of dodging it, I would have Illinois State out after today's proceedings. Probably going to be in favor of a team like Kansas State or Iowa for the time being.
Oh, no.
And that's the argument there. Should we have a team that won the Missouri Valley and had a great season, only lost 2 games in conference there, both to Wichita State, or should we have a Syracuse, a Kansas State, an Iowa, a Georgia Tech? I don't think we'll go that low, but
No, not Syracuse. Not Syracuse.
let's go ahead. Another conference championship game played today was a Big South tournament final, and as we all 3 of us predicted last night, we thought Winthrop was going to roll, and they did. But great news for the Fighting Kelseys back in the NCAA tournament there.
Yeah, after finishing in first place the last 2 years, I think this is the 3rd year in a row they've done it, but yet having to play a road game in the conference tournament, which is just categorically and stupidly unfair, getting to host this year as they should, as the overall number 1 seed, and getting it done.
Yeah, and
so
we're
good
going
for
to talk
Wentz.
about another conference in a few minutes here that needs to take a few lessons from what happened in this conference here today.
I'll get into it later, but I don't agree.
Well, let's go ahead to the third automatic bid that was handed out today was in the Atlantic Sun, and what was a closer game than this 16-point final. Actually, North Florida was up at halftime, but Gulf Coast did turn on the Dunk City in the second half, John, and ended up coasting at the end of the game there.
They turned on the dunks, but it was actually 3-point shooting where I think it actually turned, because in the first half, North Florida had hit 5 from outside and Gulf Coast 1 from outside. That number flipped in the second half, and then the Eagles started to run away for their second straight tournament bid.
There was a dunk in the second half, and I apologize for forgetting the name of the player who hit it, but he actually knocked the shot clock out for a minute or two. But when it was so impressive, it was.
Right.
But it was, Gulf Coast back in for the second consecutive year now. They're going to be a dangerous team to beat. We mentioned this a couple weeks ago that I believe they've won 9 consecutive road games here, which is the second longest in the nation behind Gonzaga for road winning streak heading into the tournament. So they are not afraid to win away from home.
Right, and they should be better positioned than what we're used to seeing. They won't be on the 16 line, and they should be above the 15 line, to be honest.
I think they got an outside shot at a 13 if a couple of upsets happen, and above that here even.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and look at a couple conferences that were in the semifinal round today, beginning with the Colonial, where Chalk held, and I don't know, David, that we really had anything that was that close.
Townsend was right in there with Charleston. Yeah. They had a lead for much of the game. They probably led for most of the game.
Right.
But, there was they couldn't put it in the hole or get a stop in the final minutes. There was a rather blatant, I think, intentional foul, flagrant foul that kind of – the momentum had already kind of started to go the other way, and after that it continued to. But nice win for Charleston. This is going to be interesting tomorrow. And again, I really hate that Wilmington has to play what amounts to a road game, albeit not on Charleston's campus. It's in the North Charleston Coliseum. What kind of crowd are we going to see? You normally don't see this building full. It might fill up tomorrow.
Oh, I think this place is going to be packed tomorrow. I think that the Charleston fans are going to come out. I think there'll be some Wilmington fans down. And this is the game we were hoping for. We just didn't think would actually happen. But they played 2 great games against each other, each one on the other team's home court during the regular season. And the game at Wilmington was an incredible game, a last-second win by Charleston. John, what do you think happens tomorrow night? Because I think this has the markings of perhaps the game of the night tomorrow.
I mean, number one, we have to give our viewers a reminder. It's not NBC Sports Network this year. It's going to be CBS Sports Network.
Oh, God. Yeah, I'm glad you're.
But that being said, they split the 2 games this year, but I'm still going to go with my original pick and say Wilmington wins this one.
Right. And, with this game here tomorrow, I guess the other thing we got to look for is if Charleston does win, we're going to have another debate here. Is Wilmington at large bid worthy? It's going to be an interesting one. It
will be. I think they are. I think they should get in. But if you're asking me whether I think they should or whether or not I think they will, those are 2 different questions. They should be in, and in my opinion, it's definite because at this point they are who they are. They've already finished first. They've already won at Charleston. What else do they have to do to make you – if you don't think that they're in now, then – if you think they're in now, why would you change your mind based on what happens tomorrow? But having said that, I don't think the committee takes them It's at least a less than 50% chance.
I'll put it to you
They
this
don't
way,
win.
Puppet. I think they can finish above the first four if they win, but honestly, I think they finish outside of the bubble if they lose.
Well, and that's right, because if they win, it's another very nice win on their resume, and that's what may push them up there. But I personally like this resume for Wilmington as it sits right now better than Illinois State, who we just discussed. So,
I do as well.
let's keep things moving here. Look over the Southern Conference. It was semifinal night as well, where we saw East Tennessee State, as I told you guys would happen, rolled over Samford, but Greensboro had a tough game with Wofford that they were able to finally pull out.
Yeah, back and forth. Really exciting game. This has been a really good tournament for the most part, and I think tomorrow's game is going to not be any different. It should be a lot of fun.
And even though this is the 1 and the 3 seed, these two teams, along with Furman, tied for the regular season championship, and this was the game that we thought would happen here in the finals.
Right.
But John, I've got East Tennessee State. You're going the other way tomorrow, though. You think it's Greensboro, correct?
Yes, because I love puppies.
I don't know what Greensboro has to do with puppies. One of these days we're going to, if
understand.
somebody wants to send us a mailbag question tomorrow to have John explain that, I'll be happy to read that one.
I should also point out that Greensboro has also swept East Tennessee State this year. I know it'll be tough to beat them a third time.
Now, if he was talking about Wofford, I would understand it. They're the Terriers, okay?
Yeah.
Greensboro's the Spartans, David. I'm just
I don't. It's one of those things that I just kind of.
okay. Well, I think we got a little sidetracked there.
Right. Yeah.
Let's head over to the Metro Atlantic, and it was the second day of quarterfinal play here in the Metro Atlantic. No, I'm sorry. It was semifinal day in the Metro Atlantic.
Yeah.
I got completely thrown off by John's.
You need a drink, not David.
I do need a drink here. Iona taking care of St. Peter's, but the game of the day, obviously, Siena and Monmouth, David. Monmouth had a nice lead at half, and things went bad beyond that.
Yeah, they did. They had what appeared to be a comfortable lead, and then they just decided to quit playing defense. Siena, I think, had over 60 points in the second half. And they hit some tough shots. They hit some contested shots. They were excellent from the line. In fact, both teams were. But what kind of galls me about this is that why would you make Monmouth play what amounts to a road game? I don't even like it when conferences don't do anything to protect their number one teams, either a ladder format or what I prefer is what the Big South now does and what the A-Sun does and what the Patriot League. Give them play it at campus sites or play it at the site of the overall number one seed. The Metro Atlantic takes it a step further. They made their first place team, and they've done it essentially what the Big South used to do. They made them play a road game.
Yeah, and there are other conferences that play games in the same city as teams such as the Colonial we just discussed, the Horizon League playing in Detroit. The Metro Atlantic is the Metro Atlantic actually and the Mountain West are the only conferences that play their games actually on the court of a team that's predetermined. Mountain West playing them on Vegas's court and on UNLV's court, and the Metro Atlantic playing them on Siena's court. And what a penalty for Monmouth. And I think that if this game had been in Monmouth, or if this game had been in Las Vegas, Monmouth would have won the game.
I'm not buying the argument of the latter because, as we saw in the Horizon last year, it still didn't work for Valpo and Oakland because they actually started in the semifinal round and actually lost both of those games.
There was no ladder in the Horizon last year, John. It was a standard format. So.
Yeah, but my thing is,
there was a ladder.
Yeah, I thought it was a ladder last year. Well, anyway.
We'll look into that.
Yeah, well, my thing is, it's just disappointing that a team that's been as good as Monmouth has been the last 2 years, which is clearly the best team in this conference, doesn't get to play in the NCAA tournament. And why can't they make it so Monmouth gets to play at home? Like, why would you make them win a road game that they've already won and then penalize them if they don't? It's like, it's that feeling that you get when you just finished a big research paper and are told, well, here, we want you to do it over. You already did it. Like, why make them go to – it's just preposterous. Well, they were the first place team, and they had to win a true road game of sorts.
Well, let's ask the question about tomorrow's game, Siena and Iona. David, who do you think wins it?
Siena.
Okay, Sienna, I'll tell you the one good thing about all of it. If we put Sienna in, Jimmy Patsos, head coach,
Yes.
can go out and do his air handshakes again, because that was one of the great moments this season.
Right.
At the end of the game with Ryder, where there was a fight, they pulled all the players off, and he just walked down the line pretending to shake hands with everybody.
It was the greatest thing. It was the greatest moment of the Metro Atlantic this year.
But I'm going to go the other way and say Iona wins this one. They were the ones that actually had the pressure 2 years ago because they were the top seed and actually built a profile that was somewhat close to the bubble, but were unable to beat Manhattan in the title game that year.
Yeah.
So I think with less pressure on their shoulders, we will see Tim Kluse and his boys in the tournament again.
And if they do, then they will have earned it. I still don't think that they were as deserving as Monmouth, but Tim Kluse did a fantastic job this year with a team that we didn't think, at least I didn't think, was going to do much.
Right.
Which also means we would have 2 Fordham transfers in the NCAA tournament. We know about Eric Paschal at Vermont, but this would also put John Sevier and Iona in the picture as well.
Just so you know, John, Vermont has not yet clinched the NCAA tournament. We will talk about them in a few minutes here. But let's head over to the Patriot League, where it was also semifinal day, and what a great pair of games here. We thought that Bucknell would roll over Navy. They did not. Navy hung in there with them the entire game, but maybe the game of the day was our first game today, David, where Lehigh and BU went double overtime.
Yeah, and it was just a great game up on the roof. It was one of those to where they just kept landing punches, taking them and counter punching. It just felt like not only was it close, it was a game of big play after big play after big play. It was great.
And also a big sigh of relief from Lehigh because they damn near blew a 6-point lead with 2 seconds to play, which I thought was impossible.
Yeah, gave up a 3 turnover and gave up another chance at a 3 to tie the game, but didn't. This last shot did not go. Really wasn't that close, and they escaped with that 3-point double overtime win. They will be at Bucknell for the championship game coming up Wednesday night, so we'll talk about that game a little bit more on Tuesday in preview of it. It was talking about the second half of the quarterfinals. This is where it was. It was in the Horizon League. And let's see what happened here, David. I'm going to go through here. First, 9 seed Youngstown State beat Cleveland State. Then 10 seed Milwaukee beat Detroit. Then yesterday, 9 seed Youngstown State beat Oakland. And 10 seed Milwaukee beat Valpo. And then 6 seed Illinois Chicago knocked out Green Bay. Finally, in the 4-5 game, the only game that you would normally think has a good shot at an upset, the higher seeded team won.
Yeah, I love how Northern Kentucky, congrats to them. You really got to take your hats off to them. We've been doing this for a long time. I have never seen a team go from being in the middle of the pack to being the highest seeded team remaining without even playing a game. It was incredible.
But I think we would also be remiss if we don't mention the Green Bay, Illinois, Chicago game. The Flames were up 16 in the second half. That flame was nearly doused because that lead shrunk to 2 with Green Bay's press, but they were unable to complete the comeback.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, I didn't do much research, but I can almost guarantee we never had semifinals in a conference tournament where it was 6 versus 10 in one and 9 versus 4 in the other. That is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I know.
And we could end up with the last 2 place teams here, Youngstown State and Milwaukee, battling for the championship game. And David, let me ask you: Do you think Youngstown and Milwaukee can continue it and pull off 2 more upsets tomorrow night?
It's as good as Youngstown has looked. It's not unthinkable, but no, I think a sense of normalcy will return. I think it's going to be NKU, and I think the chalk holds tomorrow. Whatever chalk is left.
Well, I'm going to agree with you on NKU. I think that's going to be a good game. John, I'm going to go with Milwaukee, though, over UIC.
Well, the crazy thing is the highest seeds, the 9 and the 10, are actually going to have more rests because that was designed to be for the top 2 seeds. But I still think it's going to be NKU, and I do think that Milwaukee team is going to make it to the title game.
So, John, I agree for once. There we go. We don't agree.
Somewhere out there, Bruce Pearl and Jimmy Collins are raising a cold one to each other.
I doubt it, but it's fun to think. Like, I still don't think those 2 get along.
Let's take a look at one other conference that was in action today in the Summit League. We had the second two quarterfinals as well as South Dakota State beat Denver. It was not even as close as that 10-point victory, setting up a huge South Dakota versus South Dakota State rivalry matchup tomorrow. Then Fort Wayne in the nightcap almost set up the doubleheader of rivalries until they completely blew that game, David.
Yeah, IPFW had what appeared to be a reasonably comfortable lead, but Omaha hung in there, got it at the end, and then I think it seemed like there was at least 3, and it may have been 4 or maybe even more than that, where IPFW came up empty on every possession, and Omaha just pulled it out. But again, the doubleheader, the first game, it's a shame this is the first game because the arena is going to be rocking, and then everybody's going to go home.
Well, that's kind of
there was only a one-game
yeah.
difference. There was only a one-game difference in the standings between Fort Wayne and the 3 teams that tied for third. So not your typical 3-6 game.
And that's a good point.
But yeah, I think we're going to have a good doubleheader here. David, who do you think wins these 2 games tomorrow?
I'm going to stick with the chalk. South Dakota, I know the Leathernecks made a little bit of a run at them. It was actually kind of close, but
it went overtime.
Yeah, it went overtime. It's a tough call. I realize that they're the first place team, but you know what? I'm going with the upset. I'm going to go with South Dakota State.
I'm going to go with that also. I think South Dakota State's going to win this tournament the rest of the way here. John?
I'm going to go with a couple rested teams and take South Dakota and IUPUI to actually make the title game.
Okay.
I am going with IUPUI.
Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of conferences that were not in action today but are in action again tomorrow night. Begin with the West Coast Conference. It takes Sundays off. Back in action with the semifinals tomorrow night. The early game, the 9 o'clock game, at least, is Gonzaga and Santa Clara. No upset picks. I'm not hearing them. The late game is going to be St. Mary's at BYU, and that should be a fun one, though, David.
Yes, it should be fun. We will be up very late tomorrow night.
We're up a little late there, but that's actually I mean, John, I think that St. Mary's BYU game has a chance to be one of the better games of the night.
I actually think Herb Sendek can make things a little bit interesting as he's done in conference tournaments in the past. I don't think they'll win, but I think they'll certainly make Gonzaga sweat in that one.
Well, if they're going to sweat because we have to run up and down the court a lot when they beat them by 35 points, right, David?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see that, John. I think Santa Clara is going to get crushed. I just don't see it. You can tell me I was wrong tomorrow night if they do. I just don't see it happening, especially because Gonzaga got their scare in the first half against Pacific. America East night.
The team of the people.
And let's start with the other game first. Albany Stony Brook. This is the rematch of the game that Stony Brook went on a 22-0 run to win by 2 during the regular season.
Yeah.
It was just an amazing collapse by Albany, an amazing comeback by Stony Brook. I think Albany might get it done this time, though. I think there's a little bit of revenge factor here involved.
You think?
I'm going to go with Albany in that one, in fact. But the other game here, Vermont and New Hampshire, the team of the people, a little bit of mistake in the stands there because I think that New Hampshire actually had a better season than Vermont, didn't they, David?
Well, that's how I would see it.
I mean, and we saw this.
But I mean, you agree with me on this, but not about Tim Miles. I don't.
But look at this. This is here it is again. This is New Hampshire's profile in the year. They only
look at those wins. Yeah.
Anything else that you see out there is fake news. This is the real New Hampshire profile here.
Right. So how can you not go with the team of the people?
Look at the game teams they beat. They beat Boston University. They beat Dartmouth. They beat Stony Brook.
Yeah, beat all these teams.
They beat Vermont on the road already once.
Right. They did have that home loss.
They were the preseason NIT champions.
Right, which means, yeah. I don't understand.
Oops, I'm on the wrong screen there. Okay, there we go. John, you agree with me? The new team of the people pulls off the win in Burlington tomorrow night?
I actually do because they've had they actually played a pretty decent game at Vermont the first time. I mean, take from that what you will, but in the other game, I think Stony Brook they're not going to have the weight of a past ghost on their shoulder against Albany. So I think they advance to the title game there as well.
All right. We also have two more conferences in action tomorrow night. These are both conferences that are starting up tomorrow night. We haven't looked at them at all yet. The Mid-American Conference, first round night.
Oh, yeah.
4 games tomorrow night. Northern Illinois, these are all on-campus sites for the first round before they move to Cleveland. It's Northern Illinois at Eastern Michigan, Miami, Ohio at Western Michigan, Bowling Green at Toledo, Central Michigan at Kent State. David,
Chad's favorite game.
Yeah.
let me start with you, David, and ask you, do you see any upsets tomorrow night with any of these 4 road teams winning?
If the one that kind of jumps out at me, other than the 8-9 game, is maybe Bowling Green, simply because I know that they didn't always play well, but they were certainly capable of it. But all in all, I'm not going to predict anything too shocking.
And John, let me start with you here on the second question, which is, who do you think ends up winning the MAC tournament this year, especially with Akron having stumbled a little bit down the stretch?
I'll actually go with Ohio to win the tournament, and I'll also call Miami to upset Western Michigan in the opener tomorrow night.
Wow.
Ooh, that's a big upset there.
Yeah.
David, do you agree with him? Ohio? You want to go Akron? You want to go somewhere else?
I guess I have to go with Akron, although I don't think they're going to make it based on how they've been playing. But they did have the big win at Kent State. I think that will give them some momentum. And yeah, I think it's going to, like, if I have to pick someone, it's going to be Akron. The thing about this tournament is that there's so much parity that it's kind of like a toss-up. It's calling heads or tails.
Yeah, between second place and I think about 10th place, there was about 2 games separating these teams in the standings most of the season. And
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with John here. I'm going to agree that I think Ohio U is going to end up winning this, which I would not have said a couple weeks ago when Antonio Campbell went down with his injury, but they've actually shown that they can still play without him. And
Yeah.
why not Ohio U? Because I am not confident that Akron's going to be able to pull this one off.
And Ohio's a pretty good pick. I mean, it's not, and it wouldn't shock me if Ball State even got him in the semis.
It wouldn't shock me if Eastern Michigan got them in the quarters.
Okay.
Or Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
Last but not least, or maybe last and least, the MEAC kicks off tomorrow night with the 2 of the 4 first-round games. We're going to have the North Carolina A&T Maryland Eastern Shore game, the 5-12 game, and the 6-11 game between Howard and Coppin State tomorrow night. Before we move into the other 2 first-round games, it's going to be MEAC action every night from here on out, actually. So we're talking a lot of MEAC here. But David, let's start with that 5-12 game, though. North Carolina A&T right there in the running with Alabama A&M for our centenary award for the worst team in D1.
Yeah.
And I actually have their comparison up here. I think we flashed on the screen very briefly. Here they are, the 2 of them. Is there an argument if A&T loses this game tomorrow that they are the worst team, worse than Alabama A&M?
It will be. I'll say this: if it ends up being A&T, it's not a horrible pick because they certainly put together a hell of an effort. In fact, there have been years where this resume wins it, but it's just not as bad as A&M's.
It was a very costly win against North Carolina Central.
Yeah, you can't.
Alabama A&M, you have a road victory against Mississippi Valley State, which is tough to get the centenary with a road win. A&T beat the first place team in North Carolina Central.
Yeah, and I think that's the deal breaker.
Okay. John, you see it upset either one of these 2 games tomorrow night, first of all, Howard, Coppin State, or A&T Eastern Shore?
I will go with Coppin State and Eastern Shore to win both of those games.
All right. And then who do you see winning this tournament? Because we've seen a lot of craziness in the MEAC tournament over the years.
I'll go with Norfolk State here to get back to the tournament.
Norfolk State. David, where are you going?
I'm going with North Carolina A&T.
Okay. If they do get it, that will be something. I'm going to go Morgan State. I think Todd Bozeman's still there, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go Morgan State to win this tournament. I'm not going to go NC Central, though. They really look kind of bad with that game against A&T.
And Savannah.
Yeah, Norfolk State gets it in their home city, too. So
yeah, it's in their home city. It's not on their home court, and it hasn't turned into a lot of bids for them the last few years, so I don't really give as much stock to that.
But still, it would be nice to see Norfolk State and Hampton if they could make it to the title game together.
Also, it'd be nice to see Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M in the title game together, but I don't think we're seeing that one either, John.
Right.
Let's turn to our survival board. This is where we were after last night. We had 249 teams left. David, we'd like to start by having you explain to everybody what this survival board means.
Well, we do this, and we're different. Like, you saw today Greg Marshall railing on Jerry Palm, and you've heard people go after Joe Lunardi. And I don't think that people realize that bracketologists are not an extension of the committee. They're not one and the same. We are not an extension of the committee. Quite the other way around. We and the committee is an extension of us and the survival board. So basically this is sort of the ground floor, the base of what the committee can use to pick the teams. So this is everybody left that's still playing. And there's the categories. The bold teams are the teams that we feel the committee needs to take. So we indicate that by bolding them. Some of the teams in there, albeit not SMU, just because that's an acronym, they're bold in all caps. Those are the ones that have clinched the automatic bids.
Let's show one down here. We had the Ohio Valley, for example.
Yeah. There's the Ohio Valley yesterday, Jacksonville State. The teams in italics are teams that the committee needs to look at. Maybe you take them, maybe you don't. And then the teams in normal text, those teams can only get in via the automatic bid. So once they lose in their conference tournament and are eliminated from that, they're eliminated from the survival board. We have 249 teams that entered today still playing. Some of the teams that lost will not be taken off the board. Some of them will be. It depends on whether or not they're currently in italics.
Right. So let's go ahead and refresh the board and see what happened as a result of today's games. And there it is. We lost a small handful of teams, down to 236 teams.
Yeah.
And we're now with 3 new automatic bids given out. We have to 38 teams that we believe are in, 30 more spots left in the field.
Right.
That includes both automatic bids and at-larges. But you see there, Florida Gulf Coast, now bold and all caps.
Right.
They are an automatic bid.
Right.
You see down here, let's go, I think I went too far. Let's go to the Missouri Valley, where Illinois State did not come off despite the loss because they were in italics.
Right, yeah. So we're still going to consider them still there. And I believe right there, Monmouth is still under consideration. Yeah.
There's a chance that the committee should at least discuss them.
Right.
I personally don't think Monmouth is going to get in with that loss. I don't think Illinois State's going to get in, but I think they're worth discussing, so we left them on there.
Right. And our own committee will discuss them, and as we discuss them, we will either take them off or not.
Yeah. So as further things happen, there's a chance Monmouth or Texas Arlington, who's still in italics, could come out of italics as well, but not yet.
And they're automatically going to be on the under consideration board to begin with by virtue of winning their regular season titles.
Yes,
yeah. Well, so will Texas Southern, but they're not going to be taken, and that's why they're not in italics. So, but let me go ahead and pull this down here and run through any other final thoughts from each of you. And John, let me start with you.
I teased on it earlier, but I'm going to disagree with you both as far as Albany costing Monmouth the title here. I mean, if they really want to be hungry to host a title, I hear Izod Arena in East Rutherford and also Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City are available.
Okay.
So they are, but I don't know. They can't just decide
not where they play them. It was almost better when they played it in Massachusetts because at least it was a neutral court.
Right.
Because there are 0 Metro Atlantic teams in Massachusetts. But David, any other thoughts?
Well, I mean, I agree with the sentiment that it's the kind of game that a tournament caliber team should be able to win. But my thing is they already did win it. And it's like, why should the first place team have to win on the road, but the fourth place team gets to win at home? I mean, why does that standard apply to the first place team and not somebody else with that argument? Now, that isn't what the conference's point of view is. They just pick the predetermined site because of its location and its facility. But you kind of hate to see, Monmouth the last 2 years, Winthrop the 2 years before this year, to an extent Valpo, although I know they had an injury. Teams that really could play well in the NCAA tournament and even maybe win a game, not get the chance to do it, even though they were clearly the most dominant team the whole year. Now, if they lose on their home court, or if someone gets out there and wins 2 or 3 road games like we saw Holy Cross do last year, then fine. But I just thought it was kind of lousy that they're out losing a game that they had previously won and asked to win again.
And talk to locals in Albany because they're the ones who keep supporting this tournament year in and year out.
Well, it's the league office decision.
Right. Yeah, but I think that this is something that I would change if I was running things. They don't. And you know what though? I will say in Siena's defense and Iona's defense here that this is the way that the tournament was set up. This is the way that it was going to be, and Monmouth knew this going into this season. They knew that really no matter what they did during the regular season, it was going to come down to these 3 games this weekend. They did not get it done, and they knew they had to get it done. So, they probably going to be in the NIT again, but that's where they're going to be. And it's a shame for someone like Justin Robinson, who's had a great career. His career's done now, but that's where it is. And
to be fair, had they won that game against South Carolina, which they almost did, or won the game against North Carolina, or played a tougher out-of-conference schedule, which we commented on at the beginning of the year, could be a huge setback. There are things they could have done to get inside the bubble to where maybe they didn't have to win it.
Well, I guess on that note, on behalf of John Sleeka down there, David Griggs over there, we'll be back tomorrow night. We're going to have 2 podcasts tomorrow night. We're going to do a bracket rundown show with our entire Hoops HD panel and a late night championship week video notebook as well. But I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again real soon.